A famous geographer and historian on the subject of Greco-Persian War and diplomatic relations around 450 BC, known as Herodotus, enjoyed first-hand experience with Egyptian culture, having traveled as far south as Elephantine Island in the Upper Nile, near modern Aswan. He also visited ancient religious centers of Susa in southern Iran and Babylon, in Babylonia, where Egyptian influencers were in full swing during the age of his visitations. His detailed notes on Egyptian agriculture include various references to several comestible plants that went by the name of Lotos, what we refer to as lotus. One type of lotos refers undoubtedly to the famous blue water lily of Egypt. To quote Herodotus, "They collect the flowers of a species of water lily that grows prodigiously throughout the floodplains during the time when the Nile rises and floods the riverbanks. This plant the Egyptians refer to as the lotos. They collect, I say, the flowers of this plant and dry them in the sun, and then extract from the middle of each blossom a structure that looks like a poppy capsule, which they crush to make bread." He then adds, "The root of this lotus is also edible and has an agreeably sweet taste. It is round and approaches about the size of an apple. A round and crushable fruit, with the properties of a poppy capsule, is an accurate description of a fleshy water lily capsule, which we can observe here on a 3,000-year-old statue from Karnak." Although most art historians identify images of this fruit as a pomegranate, the capsule's proportions would be all wrong for that determination, and its integration here into a water lily bud and blossom motif confirms a lotus berry identification. And we might also acknowledge that this same fruit matches precisely with fruiting lotus stalks that we observed on the ancient limestone reliefs at Saqqara in the tomb of Ti. While the fourth man in the procession carries supple flowering water lily shoots across his left arm, the second man in the procession carries a bouquet of supple fruiting water lily stalks over his left arm, the terminal capsules of which retain the persistent sepals of the flower. And judging from commentaries of Herodotus, this man's purse likely contains a harvest of detached water lily fruits. Herodotus also recognizes, however, two other plants that went by the name of lotos, one of which he describes vaguely as a shrubby plant with small berries, from which a drink was prepared, and yet another lotos plant that had long been held sacred, in fact, by the Persians during the age of Herodotus. A famous mosaic from Pompeii, of all places, that portrays life on the Nile River according to impressions of Roman elites during Egypt's Greco-Roman period, portrays a plant that matches perfectly with the third lotos described by Herodotus, even if the scene was executed several hundred years after this historian's travels to Egypt. Herodotus notes, "Another variety of lily from Egypt, which grows like the lotus from the river, resembles a rose. Its fruit springs up beside the flowers, but on a separate stalk, and looks almost exactly like a wasp nest. The fruit contains a number of seeds about the size of an olive seed, and these are good to eat, whether taken when green or dried." The rose-colored plant we observe on the mosaic of Pompeii is none other than the Asian lotus, Nelumbo nucifera, whose flower petals are ruddy in color and whose flower is about the size of a large rose. The plant's distinctive fruiting receptacle produces 10 to 20 bean-sized seeds that, in fact, can be eaten as fresh green snacks or in a dried form. And when these seeds drop out of the receptacle, the remaining fruiting structure, looks quite like a wasp comb. This particular plant species does not appear, however, in Egypt's archaeological records until 500 BC. This was the age in which the Persians had already conquered parts of Egypt and had apparently introduced this plant from the Caspian Sea to the Nile River. For a more detailed account of this plant and the lives of the Persian Zoroastrians, some of whom became pharaohs during this same age, we recommend our viewers refer to our episode on Zoroastrianism on Paradise Earth. In any case, this is not a plant that figures prominently in the spiritual lives of the historical Egyptians. For that would be specifically the blue water lily, Nymphaea nouchali, in scientific parlance today, whose buds rise just above the water surface on supple, snake-like stems. Their large and fleshy buds open into a dazzling flower with azure blue petals and a prominent golden disc in the middle. The flowers open and close to the sun for 3 consecutive days, after which, on the 4th day, the plant's supple stalks recoil and submerge themselves and the fertilized flowers beneath the water surface to initiate fruit maturation. The fruits develop into a round and yellowish, fleshy capsule. From the early commentaries of various and sundry Greek historians to the latest thoughts of modern-day scholars, foreign commentators on ancient Egyptian matters have always defined Egyptian religion as a solar cult. This unanimous viewpoint is based solidly on the fact that both early and late records of Egyptian mythology associated the everlasting and predictable movements of the sun with cosmic order, and just as well as a determinate factor that governs life and death on the Nile. Moreover, Egyptians have always symbolized a significant portion of their regional pantheons with the image of a solar disk. While creatures and dynasties might come and go on the banks of the Nile, the sun outlasted any and everything that belonged to the realm of the living. So the sun was always identified as a first principle in Egyptian cosmology. The sun was deified up and down the entirety of the Nile River system, even if the orb frequently assumed a different name and or descriptive title in different cities and municipalities.